Now, gentleman asked, do they distinguish
In China between civil and criminal acts. Not to the best of my knowledge. Basically, as I got it, I asked to go see a court, and my very good friend Jerome Cohen, who's a professor of law at Harvard University and a scholar in Chinese law, Jerry's been over there several times. He's asked to see a court of law, and they don't they don't say there aren't any. They just say, well, no, not this time. I don't think there are. It's my guess, and I think Jerry's too, that the people are the political system. As I explained before, the people decide on the nature of the crime and how the person should be punished. The young people, for example, who try to run away are sent back, and one of the ways they punish them is ostracism. They go back to the commune that they left, to the farm that they left, and nobody talks to them. And they're given very hard labor, physical labor, but nobody speaks to them. But as I did tell you, I was told for the first time, yes, there is the death penalty, and it's applied in certain cases, but only to those, as far as crimes, non-political crimes, to my knowledge, applied to those who, say, a man who's committed murder for the second time, or someone, say, for the second time that's possibly, this is just off the top of my head, who might be engaged in illicit trafficking of narcotics within China, because this they will not tolerate. But they say we try and rehabilitate everyone. Let's see who has another chair. All right, this gentleman, and then I'll get. They don't predict, and they're hoping and praying that there won't be much of a population increase. Now, that's a good question in the sense that, again, I think another fallacy is we say, oh, China is going to inherit the earth. The yellow will inherit the earth because, you know, China's got a population today. They took a census year before last, I think, 800 million. I'm sure it's more, a bit more, but 800 million. They don't want any further increase in population. Every place you go, contraceptives and contraceptive devices are offered free. There are signs all over the place. Please come into your neighborhood pharmacy or your village pharmacy and get contraceptives. There is adult education going on all over China, night classes to teach them about contraception. Now, this is not a country, obviously, that wants to expand. They've got enough problems with the population they already have. And in addition to this, a worker and his wife, or a peasant and his wife, are strongly advised to have today no more than 2 children. 2 children are fine. If an accident occurs, or if someone decides they want a 3rd child, they are told if this happens, then they're docked in salary. The husband doesn't get as much money as he was getting. So there is an absolutely concerted campaign to keep the population down. And they tell me that, you know, when you're talking to 800 million people over that vast country, it's slow, but every place there are these centers to educate the peasants and educate the workers, as well as these pharmacies, and even in the remotest villages, these barefoot doctors, these young doctors who are like paramedics, go out and teach the people about contraceptive devices. So there, in my mind, as I say, there's a determined campaign to keep that population down.
Getting back to this rehabilitation process, is it basically the same for major crimes as well as lesser crimes? By major, I mean crimes such as
Capital crimes? I'm told it is. Well, I said, as I pointed out, murder is a capital crime. And this man was telling me, this official from Canton, that even a murderer is given a chance to mend his ways, to rehabilitate himself. But the death penalty is still part of Chinese law. And if they can't, and if it is a capital crime, yes, and the man doesn't mend his ways, commits murder again, or, well, I don't think they have kidnapping there, they have enough children, but yes, the person is executed.
what about education, the literacy rate and so on? What are they
The education process has improved fantastically. It is mandatory, I think I mentioned this, for everyone to attend grammar school and middle school and high school. Everyone must be educated, must have an education. University is another matter. They've got a lot of problems in their higher system of education, which they admit themselves. They're trying some experiments which they admit may not work. I had great discussions with college professors and headmasters, principals of schools regarding this. As I mentioned, I don't know whether you were here, when any child graduates from middle school, from high school, that boy or girl must go out and work at manual labor, some form of manual labor, for 2 years. Now, I met some of these young people, and I said, well, what do you want to do? Now, their answer is, well, we're here to serve the state, to serve the people. This is one of the Chinese slogans today. You see it all over China, serve the people. Also, another slogan which you hear and see every day is self-reliance. We must be self-reliant. So I said, well, I mean, are you happy here? Now, this group of young people, we're quite happy. They said, we're learning from the peasants, and we think the peasants are learning from us. We who have graduated higher middle school, at night we teach the peasants, who are the majority of them are illiterate, of course. They're old people, have never had a chance at education. We read to them, and we write poems about them, and we read them these poems, and we try to help them, and they've helped us to understand about planting, and they've helped our bodies as well as our minds, because, you know, we were city children. We never knew what it was like to work on a farm, to plant, and to in effect commune with nature. Well, I said, well, what do you want to do when your time is up? They had been there almost 3 years. And one girl said, well, I wouldn't mind staying here. I like this life. I never thought I would, but I like it. And they all seemed to be very sincere. I went around the table. I said, I want to know what each of you want to do. And one young man answered. He said, well, you know, he said, again, they all say, I am here to serve the people, but if, you know, I have a chance, I want to go into the Army. I want to join the Army, which is a very difficult thing to do. It's not easy to join their Army, believe it or not. You have got to, in the first place, if your parent, or your father, had been a member of the Chiang Kai-shek government, there is no way that even though you might be, or your grandfather, there is no way that you will be permitted to join the Army. It's a very, very strict process. He said, I'd like to join the Army. Young lady said, I'd like to go to college. I'd like to go to agricultural college, and I hope that I'll have the possibility. Another boy said that he wanted to study medicine. He didn't know whether he wanted to be a doctor, but at least a barefoot doctor. And another one, a young lady, said that she'd like to be a writer. She'd like to write. So they certainly do have ambition, but it's up, this is the problem that China is facing right now in education. It is up to the peasants. You see, it gives the peasants, it's not a question of power, but it gives them a feeling that they belong. The peasants and the workers decide who is, which young person should go to college. Now, this is based on ideological awareness in the first place, that they have to understand Mao Zedong's thoughts. Secondly, it's based on the way they worked on the farm or in the factory. And then they make recommendations to the university. But it's not working this way. I think the college professors know this, they realize this. You know, how can an illiterate peasant say who is qualified to go to a university and who is not qualified? Yes, aptitude tests are given before these young people can enter a university, and in addition to that, or a medical school, and in addition to that, the professors rather just smile at you. You can see in their eyes that, of course, the peasant, a person who's illiterate, they don't take the peasant that seriously. But what it does is it gives the peasant and the worker a feeling of importance. You know, that they really belong, that this is their country, a country that they never felt that they belonged to before. So they are having problems. They call it a revolution in education. And a lot of mistakes are being made. But I have a feeling that this is going to change. Certainly some young people belong in university and some do not. The same goes for medical college. I talked to doctors at a medical college about this. I said, you know, how can a peasant say who has the intelligence and the aptitude to make a good surgeon? And again, you caught the smile. They also, incidentally, these doctors all understood English quite well, and just the twinkle in their eye, of course not. But the officials say, well, we still have problems in education, we're trying to work it out. But education is there, and it is free, and it is mandatory up to high school, through high school.
Any comments on the press?
Chinese press? No, only in the sense, of course, it's a controlled press. The People's Daily is the party newspaper. They have hundreds and hundreds of provincial newspapers throughout China that print only the problems of the province, of the rural areas. But really the People's Daily is the national newspaper. And then there must be 1,000 newspapers and journals throughout China. Their correspondents are now overseas in many, many countries. There are 2 of them today, 2 Xinhua, that's the New China News Agency. It's a wire service. They're in Ottawa, Canada. We have 3 and a photographer at the United Nations in New York, living in New York, but of course they don't cover any American news. They just cover the United Nations. Our government has let them go on trips around the country, which they're interested in, but they don't write about it because they are not here to cover the United States. They're very meticulous about this. They're here just to cover the United Nations and its activities. Well, if no more yes, sir.
I have one more.
Please.
This recent incident, and you spoke of it very early in your speech about the exhibit in Washington, the archaeological exhibit,
Yes.
where Chinese will not permit newsmen such as yourself, I assume, and other
No.
people, to go in there if we wouldn't let the South African, we wouldn't exclude the South Africans and several other nations. They wanted them excluded.
They said, I was still in China at that time and heard it on the Voice of America. When I got back, I was caught up on it even more. They do not recognize, as you know, South Korea. They certainly don't recognize Taiwan. And they don't recognize the South Africans, and they don't recognize the Israelis. They're adamant about this. There was to be this press preview. It's their exhibition. It's the archaeological finds are theirs. Without consultation, the museum decided to hold this preview, which the Chinese said, that's fine, to have a press preview. They were only told at the last minute that they had invited all of the press, and the Chinese said, no, we do not recognize these 3 groups of pressmen because we do not recognize their countries. We find their countries hostile towards us. And they said, we ask you not to put on this press preview, and it got very, very sticky. And the State Department was involved in this, and the State Department backed them on it, as I understand, and so the press preview was called off. But anyone, after the press preview, if I guess a nationalist journalist wanted to go in and see the exhibition, he was as welcome as anyone else. But it was because they were told that these people had been specifically invited. As I understand it, they said no, not at all. They're adamant on this.
What's the difference between the Chinese and the Israelis?
What's the difference?
Yeah, what's their argument?
Their argument basically is this, that they feel that they have more to win from the Arabs, that what to the Chinese, why are they against the Israelis? They feel that especially the question of the Palestinians, the fact that they don't have a land of their own, they've never been settled, they're for the Third World. This is a policy of theirs. They're for the Third World. And basically, the Arab world is part of the Third World. They don't, though, they don't shout down Israel as much as you would expect them to. It's rather interesting. But again, it's their policy that they're against Israel because Israel is not a member of the Third World. Israel will not even consider resettling these Palestinian refugees. That's their basic attitude. But I talked to one official, well, the same official, about these hijackings, these Arab hijackings, the needless killings, what happened at the Olympics, Germany, and they disagree. They say this is wrong. They say this is very wrong. They will say this in private. Of course it's wrong. That, you know, these hijackings destroy an aircraft that's worth millions of dollars, let alone the lives of people who have been destroyed by these fanatics. They admit that this is wrong. Well, you've been a very attentive audience, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam Jaffe. We're adjourned.